Hello again, I am Blunt. You will surprise no regular visitor to my channel that one of my personality quirks, let's call it, is I get quickly frustrated with idiots. Stupidity is a trigger for me, really. It's so frustrating to know there are people so aggressively stupid out there. And when presented with a correction to their stupidity, they're too stupid to take it on board. That's when it turns from stupidity into willful ignorance. And willful ignorance is the thing that really, really bugs me. And another personality flaw of mine, perhaps, is when presented with someone like this, I kind of get locked into the idea of getting them to see the depth of their own ignorance. I want them to be better, smarter people at the other end of the conversation. The trouble is, I get quickly frustrated, so my tone gets rather more abrupt, which, particularly in text online, can be read as aggressive. This is an issue a lot of people with autism brains like mine fall into. Our tone is often imagined to be aggressive when all we're trying to be is, well, blunt. We don't want to pussyfoot around. We're not trying to dance around the issue. We want to drive right at it, say what we mean and mean what we say. And because the neurotypical way of conversations like this going is a lot of political language, being really careful not to offend the other person. I've never bought into that politic discussion. I don't like doing it. I don't want to do it. I'm not very good at it. I'd rather just be forthright and not pussyfoot around. And that gets me in trouble from time to time, as it does many people like me, I imagine. But today, I want to show you an especially glorious one today. I got myself banned from a subreddit. Sorry, for a minute there I had to try and pretend I cared about being banned from a subreddit. So Reddit is just the most horrifically roiling mass of stupidity and willful ignorance. And I've been banned from 3 gaming subreddits over the past few years. The third one came today when I got banned from the subreddit for an upcoming game called Wild Hearts. I've made a couple of videos about it already. It's kind of a Monster Hunter style game coming out from Goei Temco, who did Tuikiden and things like that. And it's looking very interesting. I hope it plays as well as it looks like it plays. But let me share with you the interaction that got me banned and the word that I used that got me banned, because it is pretty fucking funny. It's in a thread where someone just posted no content to the message. The only thing they had was the title of their thread. The title of the thread was, "Just hope it's as good as Rise." Which is fair enough. Rise is a very, very fun game. I've played literally thousands of hours of Rise across 4 different platforms now, and I like Rise very much. I agree with them. I hope this game is as good as Rise. I don't want it to be exactly the same as Rise. I want it to be its own thing, have its own identity, but I want it to be as good as Rise, to be as fun, as compelling, to have as many hours worth of gameplay in there as I've burned into Rise. Fractionally more, 25% of the hours I've burned into Rise is still a hell of a lot of hours in this game. I do hope it's as good as Rise, like this person does. The trouble comes with the first comment that I saw on it this morning, because I got to the thing a few minutes after it was posted. I was browsing just as it was posted, and someone commented, and their name is I Am Pretty Candle, and they responded, "Depends on how you are planning to compare the two. I think the 2 games are different enough from each other to both deserve to be judged on different standards." That's not how comparison works. If you're comparing 2 things, you compare them using the same standards. I dig into this in one of my responses in this, but I'll read you what I wrote specifically to this. I start off with a big sigh. And that's because I come across this kind of idiocy, in particular in gaming, very, very often. And it's in my own videos when I've compared 2 things. You can't compare those 2 things. They're too different. Well, you've just observed them being different enough. That's you comparing them. Well, this thing is different to this thing. That means you've made a comparison. You can't compare them. You just did. So I continue. Do you realize that the word comparison includes noting the ways in which things differ? That's literally the process and purpose of comparison. If two things are identical, there is no comparison to make. You literally cannot compare two identical things. A comparison requires a dissimilarity to measure against. Reasonable enough, right? Trying to explain to them what comparison actually means. I can compare a mouse to a mining truck if I wanted to. It wouldn't be a very useful comparison to make, but I could if I wanted to, because that's what the word comparison is sitting there for. If you're comparing two games against one another in the same genre, of course you can compare them. Anyway, let me keep reading what I actually wrote. Measuring two similar things by different standards is utterly absurd. Why would you compare an apple and an orange by thinking of one as a weapon and the other one as a doorstop? It'd be absolutely stupid. No, you compare them as food, and specifically as fruit, using the same standards and expectations. And in little brackets here I've put, and welcome to the idea that the old adage, it's like comparing apples and oranges, used to imply a comparison that isn't fair or appropriate, is in fact about the dumbest thing people say regularly without even ever thinking about it once. Of course you can compare apples and oranges. That's a good thing. They're both fruit, they're both nutritious, they're easy to compare, in fact. An apple, the flesh of an apple is firm, it has an occasionally tart taste to it. The flesh of an orange is very soft and sweet and extremely juicy. And, apples you have to peel with a knife or a peeling device usually. You can't really peel them by hand. Oranges are pretty easy to peel by hand. See, all these comparisons are really easy to make, despite the fact that they grow differently. They come from different plants. They taste different. They're used in cooking differently. Oh, all those are comparisons too, by the way. Of course you can compare apples and oranges. So, I Am Pretty Candor responded to me with this. Apples and oranges are fruit, and Wild Hearts and Monster Hunter are hunting games. Thanks for pointing that out. That's good to know. So in a sense, you proved my point. You can categorize everything you want to into opposites. That's not what I did, or I was intending to do. It's a pretty futile effort, methinks. So I responded to this with a head disc and way to miss the point. Because they did. They utterly missed the point. I thought I was being pretty clear in explaining what a comparison is, what a comparison is useful for, what it means to compare two things, whether or not they are entirely dissimilar or very, very similar. It's still a comparison. Doesn't mean they're opposites. So they responded to me with, that's just semantics. Yes, it is semantics. Because the word semantics means concerned with the meaning of words. Moron! Do you personally think that both games can be compared using the same standards? Yes, because they're both action role-playing games that include hunting giant monsters with weapons you craft from the bits you get from the monsters, and armor that has different stats and things like it, and there are a few ancillary skills you can use to enhance mobility. It's very, very easy to compare these two games, as a matter of fact, because they're in the same f***ing genre. Wild Hearts is a new IP, and Rise has the accumulation of over a decade worth of content. Did you pick up on what they just did there? You shouldn't be comparing them, but they just made a comparison. So I responded to them. I have to stop interacting with you. You are far too ignorant to burn any more time on. I was getting frustrated at this point that they refused to acknowledge the concept of the word comparison. They weren't getting it. They don't understand what a comparison even is. So I was like, I can't with this anymore. I've tried a couple of times to explain what a comparison is. Simple concept that transcends human culture entirely. Every culture on the planet, they have a word for comparison. It's not some esoteric thought experiment. Is this thing the same as this thing? No. How different are they from each other? Let's describe the ways. How similar are they to each other? Let's talk about that. It's not difficult. And this person just didn't fucking get it. So I was getting pretty frustrated. You literally just compared them yourself. In a way, you're trying to insist that you can't. In a different sort of sub-conversation on this Reddit post, Shadowmaster Gus6 said, I don't want to compare it to Monster Hunter and accept it for what it is. Which is stupid. Why wouldn't you compare it to Monster Hunter? It's a very similar game in exactly the same genre and very obviously has inspired the creation of this game. No one can deny that. That's what happened. So I responded, it's foolishness in the extreme to ignore the few other games that sit within this very specific subgenre of action RPG. Monster Hunter is the example, the common touchstone, and therefore the benchmark to measure against. Wild Hearts will be compared to Monster Hunter, so better get your head around that right now. What else are you expecting? For comparisons against Stardew Valley? Which you could do if you really wanted to. You could compare Wild Hearts to Stardew Valley if you really wanted to. It wouldn't be a very useful comparison, like the mouse and the mining truck, but you could do it. But Monster Hunter and Wild Hearts is a very useful comparison because, again, they are very similar games in many ways. And it's going to be interesting to talk about in which ways they are different. In what ways does Wild Hearts provide a different experience to Monster Hunter? Shadowmaster G6 responded, well, I guess I'm a fool then. I'm not going to bother comparing the two when they are two different franchises and two different games. Why bother? Why bother? What? Because you can't evaluate anything in a vacuum. That's why bother. Why bother comparing one game to another in the same genre? Because it makes a useful touch point. Because it's a comparison point. Because all comparisons need something to compare against. The game does not exist in a vacuum. Not in its creation, not its marketing, not in its player base, its, consumers, its customer base, the people who are going to be playing this game. All of them are going to be aware of Monster Hunter. Whether or not they've played it, they'll know it exists. Of course, it's worth bothering comparing the two. Quoting him, they are two different franchises and two different games. So I responded, that statement is, by definition, a comparison. You pillock. Because he was. He was saying, no, I'm not going to compare them. Well, I don't want to compare them. I'm not making any comparisons. And then they said, well, these are two different games and two different franchises. That is a comparison. At its most basic and functional level, that's a comparison you just made. After insisting you weren't going to compare the two, it kind of got under my skin a little bit that they still weren't getting it. That is, by the way, what got me banned. I didn't engage with that conversation any further, but I called him a pillock, which is an extremely soft slang word for idiot. Common in the UK, relatively common in parts of Australia as well. Probably a bit old by today's standards, but I like the word pillock when I want to call someone an idiot because it has a sort of soft, comical, it has the P's and the K's, the comedy words, pillock. It's a percussive word. I'm just calling you an idiot, basically. And that's what got me banned from the subreddit. I was previously banned for 24 hours, a day and a half before that, for calling someone just an idiot. For a similar reason, quite frankly. They were being absolutely stupid and refusing to admit the reality of what a word means. So, fair or not, I've been banned from the Wild Hearts subreddit. Not going to spread too many tears on that because, quite frankly, it has rather severely failed to gather any kind of serious user base at all. There's like 5 people who've been active on it. We're less than 3 weeks away from the game launching. I don't think this subreddit is going to be especially strong for this game. Just for reference, the specific mod who banned me is someone called Long John Seaver. Because the second L in silver is just a capital I. Long John Seaver. Precious little baby. I called someone a pillock, and that was enough. You know what? I'm going to self-censor this video just for laughs. Anyway. Been having a pretty rough week. Very low on the motivation, so at least this gave me motivation enough to fart out a video for a bit of a laugh. Let me know down below your favourite stories of gamers being colossal idiots and refusing to acknowledge, how language works, for example. Thanks for watching. I'm Blanty. We'll catch you next time. And looking forward to Wild Hearts. Thank you as always to the patrons, of course. None of whom are pillocks, probably.